In this module, I'd like to tell you about the Director user interface and how it works. There are two main user interfaces for enterprise data quality. This is one of them, Director. It's used for configuration and testing. The other one is called the Server Console, and that's used for operations in production environments. And we'll talk more about that one later on. But we'll start with the Director user interface. So let me tell you about how that works. There are four main areas of the Director user interface. On the left, we have the project browser. In the middle, we have the process canvas, which is sometimes just known as the canvas. On the right, we have the tool palette. And at the bottom, you can see the results browser. I'd like to give you a tour of the Director user interface now then. So how do we launch Director first of all? Well, we go to a web page called the Launchpad. Here's the Launchpad, and the address that you'll put in will be slightly different depending upon which environment you're using. The port number, for example, here is 9002. On the training virtual machine, it's 9012. On another VM supplied by EDQ product management, it'll be 9102. So there are some differences, but each EDQ instance will have a launchpad, and from the launchpad we can launch the EDQ user interfaces. So here is the link for Director. So to launch Director, I just hit that link, and Director will download itself via Java Web Start. You can see that happening now, and in a little while it will start up. So let's just wait for that to happen. You can see the splash screen coming up now, and here we are. And I put in my credentials. Now the DNadmin user, I'm logging on as DNadmin. This is a super user created at install, and we use that user for the training. So just while that's logging on, I'll just reposition and resize the interface a little bit. There we go, that's better. Okay, and you can see the project browser on the left of the screen. The other three main areas, the canvas, the tool palette, the results browser, they're not active yet. Because to make them active, we have to create a project. Now, that leads us to a key concept, the concept of projects. In EDQ, we divide our data quality work into projects. And typically, for each different kind of data we're dealing with, we're going to have a different project. So let's say we're dealing with employee data, and also product data, and also customer data. We probably have three different projects, one for each kind of data. Let's create a new project. Now to do that, we're going to right click on the projects node and select new project from the menu. And then we get into a new project wizard. Now, both of those things are general features of EDQ. If you want to create a new object, normally you right click, and normally that will take you into a wizard to make it easy to create that new object. So let's go through the wizard. The project we're going to create, we'll just call training project. There we go. We just hit next in the wizard, and we get into a project permissions screen. Now, I could limit which EDQ user groups can access this new project. I could select a group. So if this was our employee data project, and I had a group for my HR users, I could limit access to just that group. But because this is a training project, we'll say anyone can access it. It's fine, it's training. We'll hit finish. And our new project appears in the left in the project browser. And if I expand it by clicking the little plus to its left-hand side, you can see the objects within the project. And we're going to be looking at each of these objects in some detail during the training. Data stores, stage data, data interfaces, processes, we'll go through many of these. For now, let me show you some of the basics. So let's create a thing called a data store. Now, we're dealing with data quality, and we need to have the data to deal with. So the first thing we need to do is we need to tell EDQ where that data is and what format it's in. Is it in a database? Is it in a file of some kind? If so, what kind of database? What kind of file? Where is it? What's the name of the file? What are the connection details of the database, and so on? And we do those things by creating a data store that tells EDQ where the data is. Let's do that now. Right click on data stores and hit new data store. Again, we get into a wizard. Now, for example, I could say, well, the data is on my client and it's in a text file, and hit next. And next I could say, well, the separator is not a comma, it's a pipe symbol, and there's a header row as well. And I could go off and I could look for that text file. But in my case, let me just go back. I'm going to say actually the data's on the server and it's in a database. And you can see here we can choose what kind of database. It could be an Oracle database, PostgreSQL. In our case, it's going to be a MySQL database. So our data is held in a MySQL database on the server. Let's hit next. And here I put in the connection details. What's the name of the host? Well, it's localhost, or this could obviously be an IP address, but it's on the local host. Which port should we access it on? We'll leave the standard 13306. What's the name of the database? It's called Service Management. This is the same database that you'll access in the labs. Notice there's a big S and a big M if you're using the MySQL version of this. And the username is servman, all in lowercase, SERVMAN, and the password is also servman, again, all in lowercase, and we can then hit test. Okay, and said it didn't work, and that's because there was, I think, one extra character, an M, that I've just deleted in the name. So let's hit test again, and this time we've successfully connected to the service management database. So if you do experience a problem there, it's probably a typo. That's exactly what I did. So let's hit OK, and we'll hit next, and we can give our connection, our data store, a name, and I'll call this just connection to service management database, and I can put a description in. I won't do that now, but it's quite good practice. Hit finish, and now we have a data store. So EDQ now knows where the data is. Now, in order to actually work with the data, we need to have it at our fingertips, if you like. And there's a few ways that we have of connecting, of bringing the data into EDQ. We can use web services. You can see the web services node down here. We'll explore that a bit later on in this course. We can stream the data in. Have a look at the help. There's a topic called performance tuning, which tells you how to do that in the help. What we're going to do is we're going to snapshot the data. We're going to stage it. So under stage data, right click and use snapshot. So what this will actually do is take a copy of the data and copy it into EDQ's repository, into EDQ's results database. Okay, so it takes a copy for EDQ to work with. So we're going to use our connection to the service management database. That's where the data is, in that MySQL database on the local host. Hit next, and EDQ will go and look in that database, and it says, right, well, I found a number of tables. Which one do you want? We want the customers table. Hit next again, and it goes off and says, here are all the fields in the customers table. And we could say we just want some of them, but we'll leave them all selected. We want to take in all of the data from all of the fields. Hit next. We've got some options around filtering and sampling. There's a module on sampling later, so we won't do that now. We'll hit next again, and we can give this a name, either keep the suggestion, or I'm going to call this customers table, and hit finish. And at that point, EDQ then takes a copy of that data. That's what a snapshot is. It's taking a copy at a moment in time, and it brings it into the EDQ repository. And then our results browser becomes active. And in the results browser at the bottom of the screen here, you can see the data from that customers table from the MySQL database. There it is. Okay, fairly typical customer data, customer number, a name, gender, business name, address details there, postcodes or zip codes, in other words, email addresses, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so far we've said where our data is and we've staged it. We've taken a snapshot of it. That's what you'll do shortly in the labs. And now what we can do is we can begin to process it. So we can start doing things to it, to understand it, to ultimately improve it, and so on. So under processes, we can now right click and choose new process. Again, we get into a wizard. What data do we want to work with? Well, the data from our customers table that we just snapshotted, we just took a copy of. By the way, the fact we've taken a copy is often a good thing, because if our service management database was a production database, we don't necessarily want to keep on going back to it and putting demands on it. Better to take a copy and work with the copy. Hit next. We'll leave this add profiling for now. We'll talk about that later. Hit next again and give this process a name, and we can call it customer data. Let's just call it customer data process for now. Hit finish. And now, in a second, our process canvas in the middle of the screen is going to become active, and so does the tool palette on the right. So let's think about these two parts of the screen now, the process canvas and the tool palette. Now at the moment the process canvas has something called a reader on it, and all that's doing is just reading in the data from the customers table. If we just run the processor by clicking that little green icon there, it's just going to show us the data again in the results browser, that's all. But what we can start to do is to build a process. Now, we'll do a module on profiling in a minute, but let's just note for now that our tools in the tool palette, our tools for doing things with data, are divided into families. Now each tool is called a processor, so what you see in the list here are a list of processors. And the family we're looking at the moment is the profiling family. So this little icon of the graph, this is the profiling family. And we'll talk more about profiling later, but we use profilers to understand our data. Before we start making changes to it, we need to understand what the problems and the challenges are, and we do that using the profiling family of processors. The next family along with the green tick, let's click there. This is the audit family. So here we see all of the audit processors. These allow us to create checks. They all end with the word check. We could check the email addresses. Are they in the right format, for example? We could check whether there's data in a particular field. We could do a regex check to see if the contents of a field conforms to a particular pattern in all cases, and so on. The next family along is called transformation. In this family, we can start to actually change and improve our data in various different ways. We won't go through that now. Then we have a matching family. Then we have a text analysis family. Here's the third-party family that includes address verification, and so on. Okay, and here's the read and write family. So this is how we get data in. We all, by default, have a reader on our process. When we create it, there's a writer which allows us to stage data that we've changed in some way. So really in the tool palette we have our tools. If we want to search for a particular processor, we can use the search box here. So for example, if I want to search for processors that do things with dates, then I can put the word date in. You can see all of these have date somewhere in the name. Okay, converts date to string, consolidate, all right, add current date, etc. So you can search for processors, or you can go to a family. So let's go to the profiling family, and I'll just pull on one of the profiling processors, the one called Quick Stats Profiler. Often a good place to start. Profiling allows us to understand our data. Quick Stats is a quick way to start doing that. So all I did was just drag that processor onto the canvas and dropped it. I'll delete my second copy here because I don't need both. Let's just delete that. And there it is on the canvas. And now I can hook it up to the reader. So I just simply drag and drop a line from the output of the reader to the input of the Quick Stats processor, Quick Stats Profiler, sorry. And then a dialog opens to allow me to configure the Quick Stats Profiler. So I can choose which of the fields from the customers table I want to profile. And I could just choose 1 or 2 or 3, or I could choose all of them by hitting the big blue arrow at the top, and we'll do that. Now some processors have options, this one doesn't, but many do. Okay, so we just hit OK now, and having joined them up, we have a green circular arrow on the Quick Stats Profiler, meaning that it's ready to run and it needs updating. So we'll run our process. We do that with the green play button at the top, and we'll see what happens. So let's hit run. You can see the process canvas goes blue while the process is running, and a bar goes along the bottom here, a blue bar. showing us how complete the process is. It will take a few seconds to run. Not a particularly powerful machine that I'm using here. So it's nearly done. You can see in the tasks window, bottom left, we can see progress there. Let's just try and make that a bit bigger, not that it's showing us very much. And in a second or two, this will finish. So now it's finished. Okay, the process canvas is wide again, the task window is empty. To see the results from our quick stats profiler, we click the processor and then its results appear in the results browser at the bottom. Okay. Now, let's just have a think about this. So what we're seeing here then is each field in the customers table down the side, CU number, CU account, title, name, gender, business address, 1, 2, 3, postcode, area code, telephone number, etc. And then we're seeing the results for each here from the quick stats profiler. So it's showing us for each field how many of the rows have data. Now, in this data, if I just click the reader again, there are actually 2001 records. We can see that here in the record count. Go back to the quick stats profiler results. So in the CU number field, 2000 of those rows have data in them. One is empty, it has no data. And there are 3 duplicate entries. Now, if we want to see what those 3 duplicate entries are, we can drill down by clicking on the number 3. Anything in blue, you can drill down on. Let's do that now. We drill down one more level. The duplicate number is 999999 or whatever. And drill down again, and then we can see the 3 rows of data which have duplicate customer numbers. These look like test records. Let's go back. So hit the back button here in the results browser to go back a level, just like a web browser, really similar kind of idea. If you want to look at the gender field, let's take a look at that one. So there we've got 148 records without data in them. And again, we can click on that 148, it's in blue, and drill down and look at them. And here are the 148 records without a gender. Okay. Now, if you look at these, most of them have a title. So perhaps we could derive the gender from the title, or the title and the first name. Let's hit back again. Okay. So I'm not going to go through profiling in detail. There's a separate module on that, and we'll look at the other processor families in the tool palette later on. But I hope that gives you an idea of how the director user interface works. Now, one or two other points that we'll just quickly note. If you want to, and this isn't a kind of a full-blown export from EDQ, it's just a quick and dirty method of transferring the results somewhere else, there's a little Excel icon here, and you can export what you see in the results browser to an Excel spreadsheet. That can be quite useful if you want to mail it to a friend, for example, or a colleague. So remember that that's there, and the exercises, I think, will get you to do that either now or a little bit later on. One other point that's worth mentioning on the subject of the results browser is results books. So to get a results book, we click this little icon here. Okay. Now, why would we do that? Well, let's have a look at it. Let's say that we're interested in this fact there's 148 rows without a gender. Click on there. Go and look at them. Here they are. And let's add these 148 rows without a gender to a results book. Okay, so we'll create a new results book. We don't have one already. We'll call this rows with empty gender. Sorry, no, we won't. We'll call the results book just interesting results, I think, from profiling. And we'll hit finish, and we'll hit next, and the page we'll call records from customer data without a gender. Okay. And we get this results book on the left here. You can see it in the project browser. Interesting results from profiling, and so far we've got one tab, records from customer data without a gender. And there are, if we look at that, our 148 records without a gender. If I go back to the quick stats profiler, let's find something else that's interesting. Let's Look at those 3 duplicate customer numbers again. Drill down on the number 3 there. Here are the 3 records with a duplicate customer number. Let's save those to our results book as well. We'll hit the results book icon in the results browser's toolbar. There we go. We're going to put it in the same results book, but this time we'll call the page duplicate customer numbers. We'll hit finish. And can you see, if we look at our results book here, let's just click on to something else. Let's say the data store for a minute, go back to our results book. And there it is. It appears in the results browser, and you can see the 2 tabs. Records from customer data without agenda. These are the ones without agenda. And the 3 duplicate customer numbers here. So we're just collecting interesting results from profiling into this thing called a results book. It's just a nice kind of scratch pad for collecting interesting stuff that we come across when we're looking at data or changing it or whatever. And of course, we could combine that, hit the Export to Excel tab here, button here, sorry, not tab, and that would then export this results books to Excel. We get a different Excel tab worksheet for each of the tabs we see here in the results results book. All right, so that's a nice little thing as well. Okay, before we stop, one more key piece of functionality. In the training, there isn't enough time to show you every single processor. You can see it's quite a few of them, even in the profiling family, and there's more families. But you can find out about them yourself, and you can do that by looking at the online help. To get to the online help, select a processor on the canvas, and on your keyboard, hit the F1 key. I'm not sure if I can do that here because I'm working in a virtual machine and I'm not sure what my F1 key is, I'm afraid. But you can try it anyway, and that will bring up online help for you in a browser, and it will tell you all about the Quick Stats Profiler and what it does. So do try that on your own accord. Unfortunately, I can't show you here, but you can try it when you're doing the exercises. So that's the direct user interface. Remember the key areas: the project browser on the left, the process canvas, where we build data quality processes in the middle, the tool palette, where we have the processors divided into families from which we can construct our processes, and the results browser, where we can see the results of our processes at the bottom. Okay, let's just quickly recap some of what I told you about in the demo. Starting with the project browser, remember that's the area of the screen on the left. And as we said, we have a number of projects typically in an EDQ instance, one for each kind of data usually that we're dealing with, or for everything we want to do, for each thing we want to do with that data. And each project can have data stores. These are just connectors to the data. So as I said, that tells EDQ where the data is. Is it held in a database? Is it held in a file? Where is that file or database? What's its precise format, and so on. Now, one thing that I'll mention here is I showed you that we create data stores to allow EDQ to connect to import targets, if you like, data we want to get hold of to use in a project. But we also create data stores for export as well. So basically a data store can be for an import target and or for a file or a database that we want to export data to when we've finished working with it in EDQ. They work both ways. Stage data. So stage data is data from one of those sources of data, a database or a table in a database, or a file or whatever, which has been copied into the EDQ repository. And that's known as creating a snapshot. So your snapshot is just a copy of the data from your file or database. Now, again, we can snapshot data when we want to import it. We have to do that often. But also we can create stage data in order to export it. So when we've changed data in EDQ, we stage it again in order to export that data. So again, stage data, like data stores, are for bringing data into EDQ and also for exporting it out of EDQ. Processes, Well, a process does something to data. It allows you to understand the data or to improve its quality or deduplicate it, or any one of the things we can do with EDQ, or in fact a number of them at once, because a process can start with profiling, move through auditing and transforming, and go into matching and parsing and so on. I didn't mention reference data. We'll come back to this later. This is data which helps us to understand or work with data. Okay, so let's say that we have a list of account managers in our data, and we want to know whether all of the entries are valid. Well, we could create a reference data list of valid account managers, and then we can understand whether our working data, as it's known, is valid by comparing it to the reference data. We'll come back to reference data, it's important. We'll cover it in more detail a bit later. And then finally, jobs. We haven't been through these yet. There's a separate module on automated processing where we look at jobs. And jobs allow us to string together snapshots, imports of data, and processes that do things with data, and exports, and then actually to automate them and to schedule them to run regularly if we want to do that. Okay, let's think about the tool palette on the right hand side of the screen that I showed you in the demo. And that's where the processes live, the tools that allow you to do things with your data, manipulate it, understand it, change it, and so on. And remember, the processes are divided into processor families. I showed you the profiling family and the audit family and the transformation family, the matching family, and there's various other ones as well. You just drag and drop processes from the tool palette onto the process canvas, and that's how you create your EDQ processes. And we'll do much more of that as we go through the training. And remember, there is a search box at the bottom of the tool palette which allows you to search for processes rather than look through the families if you'd like to do that. Let's think about the process canvas. I showed you this, but I'd like to mention some other features. First of all, you can rename the processes on the canvas. Now that's very, very useful. If you build a complex EDQ process and you come back to it a year after you've built it, it can be quite difficult to understand what's going on. Why did you construct it in the way that you did? What exactly is it doing? For anyone else coming to it from fresh, it's very difficult to understand as well if it's complex. And annotating your process obviously makes it much easier for anybody else to understand it. And one of the ways you can do that is just simply by renaming an instance of a processor on the canvas. You just double click its name, no data check, for example, and you rename it. Is there data in the gender field? Then it's really obvious what it's doing. You can also create canvas notes. Just right click on the canvas and create a canvas note, and you just type free text into that to annotate your process as well. You can also group processes, and you'll see that a little bit later on. Let's look at the results browser then. I showed you this in the demo. Just remember that any text in blue in the results browser is hyperlinked. So you can drill down on it, you can get as far as the underlying records, which is really nice functionality. Remember, you also have the export to Excel buttons, icons on the results browser's toolbar, which you can use to obviously export the results to Excel, which is just a quick, dirty way of getting results out of EDQ, perhaps to email to a colleague or something like that. Let's think about results books then. These are quick ways of collecting interesting data, which you can then look at later perhaps and deal with later on. So just a good way of collating interesting data, problems that you find in the data to deal with later on. And lastly, let's think about the interactive help. I couldn't show you this in the demo, but if you just select a processor once you've dragged it onto the canvas, and then you hit the F1 key on your keyboard, that will bring up context-sensitive help about that processor, and it will tell you what the processor does, any options it takes, how it works, and so on. And that's a really good resource for you to use. In the training, we can't go through every processor, so just do some discovery yourself really by using the interactive help. If you're not sure which processor to use or what a processor does, explore using the help, and that will tell you.